Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the Islamic SHAHADA channel. In the heart of Buffalo, New York, a city once defined by the steeples of Catholic churches and the toll of Sunday bells, a quiet transformation is unfolding. For more than a century, Buffalo stood as a symbol of America's industrial strength and religious devotion. Immigrant families from Germany, Poland, and Ireland built majestic churches here, Gothic towers of stone rising proudly over working-class neighborhoods. They were not just places of worship, but anchors of identity, echoing with hymns that bound communities together. But as the decades passed, the sound of the city began to change. Factories closed, neighborhoods thinned, and pews that were once full on Sunday mornings began to empty. The grand churches, once built to hold thousands, now stood silent, their stained glass windows dimmed by time, and yet, from within those same walls, a new sound began to emerge, the rhythmic call to prayer, the adhan. The voices are different, the language unfamiliar, but the devotion remains the same. In Buffalo today, some of the city's oldest Catholic churches have found new life, not as museums or ruins, but as mosques. The faithful gather once again, bowing in prayer where generations once knelt before the altar. The story of Islam in Buffalo stretches back nearly a century, beginning quietly in the 1930s. During this period, small groups of immigrants from Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria began arriving in western New York. Most came to work in Buffalo's booming industrial sector, the steel mills, grain elevators, and railroad yards that once powered the American economy. They were young men, often separated from their families, carrying with them little more than their traditions, their resilience, and their faith. In those early decades, there were no Islamic centers, no established congregations, and certainly no mosques. The first prayers were held in cramped apartments, rented basements, and community halls borrowed from friends. Yet these small gatherings laid the foundation for a faith community that would one day reshape Buffalo's religious landscape. By the 1960s and 1970s, a new wave of Muslims began arriving, this time as students and professionals. The expansion of Sunni Buffalo drew young men and women from South Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Many intended to study engineering, medicine, and the sciences before returning home. But a significant number stayed, building careers and raising families in the region. Their presence transformed the identity of the local Muslim community from a small cluster of immigrant laborers into a diverse, multi-ethnic network of families. In 1971, this growing community took a historic step with the founding of the Islamic Society of Niagara Frontier, or ISNF. It became the first formal Muslim organization in the Buffalo area, an anchor institution created through collective effort and long-term vision. For the first time, Muslims in Buffalo had an organized space for prayer, education, and community life. Friday prayers that once rotated through living rooms now found a permanent home, and children who had never seen a mosque before now had a place to learn the Quran. From these humble beginnings, the Muslim presence in Buffalo expanded steadily across the decades. What began as a few families seeking a place to pray has grown into one of Western New York's most active and diverse faith communities. Today, the descendants of those early laborers and the families of former international students stand side by side, business owners, healthcare workers, university faculty, refugees, and lifelong residents, all helping to shape the spiritual and cultural character of Buffalo. Their story is a reminder that the city's religious landscape did not remain frozen in time, but continues to evolve generation after generation. St. Anne's Church was once one of Buffalo's most cherished Catholic landmarks. Built in 1886 by German Catholic immigrants, it stood as a monument to the hopes and sacrifices of a community that carved out a new life in the American Northeast. With its soaring Gothic spires, hand-carved altars, and intricate stained glass windows, St. Anne's represented more than a house of worship. It was a cultural anchor for generations of working-class families who settled on Buffalo's east side. But as the decades passed, the neighborhood changed. Factories closed, families moved to the suburbs, and the Catholic population dwindled. By the early 21st century, the Diocese of Buffalo faced steep financial pressures and a shrinking number of parishioners. St. Anne's, once filled with Sunday Mass goers, now echoed with emptiness. Eventually, the diocese made the painful decision to close the church, leaving the building abandoned, deteriorating, and at risk of demolition. It was at this moment that Buffalo's Muslim community stepped forward with an unexpected proposal, not to replace the church's history, but to preserve it. To take a building that had once served German Catholics and allow it to serve a new generation of believers. Their goal was not to strip away its past, but to protect a part of Buffalo's architectural and spiritual heritage that would otherwise be lost. The idea sparked immediate debate across the city. Some residents welcomed the move, seeing it as a respectful continuation of the building's purpose as a house of worship. They argued that saving St. Anne's, in any sacred form, was better than watching it fall into decay. Others were uneasy, feeling that the conversion symbolized a deeper loss, the fading presence of Catholicism in a city where it once dominated nearly every neighborhood. For them, the church's transformation was not merely practical, it was emotional, yet the outcome was clear. The Muslim community's involvement ensured that St. Anne's did not collapse into ruin like so many historic churches across the Rust Belt. Instead, it was revived as a place of prayer and community life. Much of the original architecture was preserved, including its vaulted ceilings, stone columns, and stained glass inside. Verses once sung in Latin were replaced by Quranic recitation. The building's sacredness remained. Only the language of devotion had changed. When Muslims took over the empty church, they didn't erase its legacy. They protected it. The stained glass still tells stories of faith, surviving a century of change. Only now, the prayers rising beneath those windows come in Arabic. And for many in Buffalo, that transformation symbolizes not a loss, but a continuation. A reminder that sacred spaces can outlive the communities that built them, finding new life in the hands of others who value them. While the story of St. Anne's is striking, it is far from unique. Across Buffalo, several historic Catholic and Christian churches have found new life through their conversion into mosques or Islamic institutions. Together, they form a quiet but powerful pattern that reflects demographic shifts, not only in Buffalo, but throughout the United States. These transformations reveal a deeper truth. Sacred spaces are adapting, surviving, and being preserved by communities that continue to cherish them. One of the earliest and most influential transformations began with the former Holy Mother of the Rosary Church. Once a proud Polish Catholic parish, it stood as a symbol of immigrant devotion during Buffalo's industrial peak. But when the congregation declined in the late 20th century, the building faced the same fate as many other churches in the region: closure and possible abandonment. In the 1990s, a group of Muslim scholars and community leaders stepped forward. The complex was purchased and reborn as Darul Uloom al-Madaniya and Masjid Zakariya, now the largest Islamic educational center in Buffalo. What began as a small seminary has grown into a respected institution, attracting students from across the United States and Canada. Classrooms, dormitories, and prayer halls now fill the space where pews once stood, and the structure's grand sanctuary continues to echo with devotion, preserved rather than forgotten. A similar story unfolded at the former Queen of Peace Church. Around 2007 to 2009, the once active Catholic parish was converted into Jami Masjid of Buffalo, one of the city's most vibrant South Asian mosques. Here, the transformation was both physical and cultural. The murals that once decorated the apse were carefully painted over with sky blue tones. Stained glass depictions of biblical scenes were replaced with simple, clear windows. The long wooden pews were removed and replaced with soft Turkish carpets. A new wudu area was built, along with a separate prayer space for women. And yet, despite these changes, the building's role remained the same. It continued to serve as a spiritual home for Muslim families from Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. Jami Masjid is now a center of community life, hosting Friday prayers, children's classes, youth programs, and gatherings that fill the halls once again. Then there is St. Gerard's, one of Buffalo's architectural masterpieces. Built in 1913 with stone columns, an ornate basilica-style dome, and intricate Renaissance revival detailing, it was long considered one of the most beautiful churches in the city. But like many parishes, St. Gerard's was forced to close in 2008 due to dwindling attendance. Nearly a decade later, in 2017, local Muslim organizations expressed interest in purchasing and preserving the church. Reports noted that the property was sold for $120,000 with plans to rehabilitate and convert it into a mosque. While final renovation steps have been complex and ongoing, the significance of this event remains clear. Muslim community leaders were among the few willing to save a massive aging church from decay. Their involvement kept the building intact, demonstrating that sacred architecture can survive by serving new communities. On Buffalo's east side, another former Catholic parish, St. Joachim, became Baitul Mamour Masjid. This transformation supported a growing community of African, Arab, and Yemeni Muslims, many of whom have lived and worked in Buffalo for generations. The church's sturdy structure, once a gathering place for working-class Catholic families, now serves as a spiritual anchor for Muslim households facing many of the same economic struggles that shaped the parish decades earlier. In a region marked by population loss and disinvestment, the mosque stands as a symbol of resilience, providing stability and community for one of Buffalo's oldest Muslim neighborhoods. Taken together, these conversions tell a larger story, one far more nuanced than public debates often suggest. The transformation of churches into mosques is not about conquest, competition, or replacing one religion with another. It is about preservation. It is about saving buildings that would otherwise collapse or be demolished. And it is about ensuring that sacred spaces continue to breathe with worship, compassion, and community life. As Catholic congregations shrink from demographic changes, and as Muslim communities expand through immigration, births, and new generations of local converts, these buildings become bridges between past and present. In Buffalo, they reveal not the decline of faith, but its continuity. They show a city defined by waves of belief, migration, adaptation, and renewal, where sacred spaces survive not by remaining unchanged, but by finding new voices to fill their halls. Today, the Muslim community in Buffalo is larger, more visible, and more deeply rooted than at any point in the city's history. As of 2025, an estimated 20,000 to 25,000 Muslims call Buffalo and its surrounding suburbs home. The population grows steadily each year, shaped by immigration, new generations born in the United States, and a rising number of local converts who find meaning in Islam's spiritual discipline and communal life. What began with a few dozen families praying in basements has evolved into one of the most diverse and dynamic faith communities in Western New York. This diversity is one of Buffalo's most defining features. The Muslim population spans a wide range of ethnic and cultural backgrounds, families from Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh who arrived during the 1970s and 1980s, long-established Yemeni and Somali communities who have shaped the east and west sides for decades, and African-American Muslims whose presence reflects a deep tradition of indigenous American Islam. Together, they form a mosaic of languages, traditions, and histories, yet they share the same commitment to building a stable, faith-driven future in the city they call home. Across Buffalo, mosques and Islamic centers are not just places of prayer. They are centers of social support and civic engagement. At Masjid Zakariya and the Islamic Society of Niagara Frontier, open house events invite non-Muslim neighbors to step inside, ask questions, enjoy food, and experience Muslim hospitality firsthand. These gatherings have become an important way to build trust and understanding, especially during moments of national tension surrounding religion and identity. Community service is another pillar of Muslim life in Buffalo. Feed Buffalo, a well-known halal food pantry, provides healthy meals to families of all backgrounds, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. Many of its volunteers are young people who grew up in the city and see service not as an obligation, but as a natural expression of their faith. Their work reflects a quiet, consistent truth. The Muslim presence in Buffalo is woven into the daily effort to care for the vulnerable and uplift the wider community. Cooperation also extends to the interfaith sphere. The Interfaith Buffalo Network brings Muslims, Christians, Jews, and members of other faiths together to address issues such as poverty, refugee support, racial justice, and environmental protection. At these gatherings, imams sit alongside priests and rabbis, working together on projects that keep the city's moral spirit alive. Their collaboration demonstrates that Buffalo's religious communities are not in competition, but in conversation, shaping a shared vision for the city's future. In reality, Buffalo's Muslims are not outsiders, despite old stereotypes that linger in public imagination. They are teachers guiding the next generation, doctors serving in local hospitals, engineers working on the city's infrastructure, and small business owners fueling neighborhood economies. They are students walking the halls of SUNY Buffalo, parents raising children on the city's quiet residential streets, and volunteers keeping community programs alive. They are part of the city's heartbeat, shaping Buffalo through faith, work, and a deep commitment to belonging. For many Muslims in America, the years after 9/11 marked a turning point, a period when everyday life became shadowed by suspicion, political rhetoric, and growing misconceptions about their faith. Buffalo was not immune to these national currents. Families who had lived here for decades suddenly found themselves questioned at airports, stared at in grocery stores, or confronted with stereotypes fueled by headlines rather than lived reality. The rise of political polarization in the 2010s and 2020s added another layer, intensifying cultural divides and making religious minorities easy targets in national debates they never asked to be part of. But Buffalo also tells a very different story, one that often gets overlooked in broader narratives about Islam in America. Here, local solidarity has long served as a counterweight to fear time, and again, when this city has faced crisis, its religious communities have shown that compassion runs deeper than division. During the devastating snowstorms that paralyzed western New York, churches opened their doors to stranded families, and mosques followed suit, turning their prayer halls into shelters where neighbors, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and secular, slept side by side on donated blankets. When the COVID-19 pandemic swept through the region, imams and priests worked together to deliver groceries, share medical resources, and distribute masks to vulnerable communities. What mattered in those moments was not theology, but humanity. These acts of solidarity reveal something profound about Buffalo's character. In a world where narratives of conflict often dominate, this city shows that coexistence is not only possible, it is already happening quietly, every day, and it is happening because ordinary people choose empathy over suspicion and cooperation over isolation. The reality is simple. Misconceptions fade when people meet each other face to face, when a church pastor visits a mosque during Ramadan, when Muslim teens volunteer alongside Catholic students at a food pantry, or when Jewish and Muslim families work together on environmental projects in their shared neighborhoods. These encounters build the kind of trust that political debate alone can never produce. In times of crisis, Buffalo's faith communities often come together, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, proving that compassion transcends creed. And in that unity, they offer a powerful reminder: a city's true strength is not measured by the differences within it, but by how its people rise above those differences to care for one another. As we step back and look at Buffalo's evolving religious landscape, it becomes clear that this is more than a story about buildings. It is a story about the cycles of faith, change, and renewal that have always shaped American life. For generations, churches were the beating heart of immigrant neighborhoods, places where new arrivals found community, purpose, and hope. Today, those same spaces are being revitalized by another wave of believers, carrying different languages, different traditions, and different histories, yet guided by the same longing for belonging and the same trust in the divine. In this light, the transformation of churches into mosques is not an ending but a continuation. It is a reminder that sacred spaces do not die when congregations shrink. They simply wait for new chapters to unfold. A building that once echoed with hymns now carries the soft recitation of the Quran. Stained glass windows that once illuminated wooden pews now cast their colors across prayer rugs. Architecture endures, even as the voices within it change. And in that continuity, there is something quietly beautiful. Perhaps what's happening in Buffalo is not a story of decline, but renewal, old buildings reborn, and faith rediscovered in new forms. Where some see loss, others see preservation. Where some see emptiness, others see opportunity. The story is not one faith replacing another, but a city adapting to the people who still love, still worship, and still gather in these sacred halls. Inside these repurposed spaces, children sit in small circles learning to read the Quran, their voices mingling with the distant hum of an old boiler that once warmed Sunday Mass. Outside, snow falls gently over domes and steeples alike, blurring the lines between past and present. The rhythm of life continues. The city breathes, and faith in all its forms persists. Buffalo shows us that religion in America is not fading. It is shifting, evolving, and constantly being reborn through the communities that nurture it. And in these acts of renewal, we are reminded that spiritual life is never static. It is carried forward by those who continue to hope, continue to pray, and continue to imagine a future where sacred spaces remain alive, no matter who enters their doors. Although Bhutan's Muslim population is small and dispersed, several urban and border regions host modest but identifiable communities. Their presence is shaped by economic opportunities, proximity to India, and the availability of informal spaces where they can gather for prayer and community activities. Thimphu, the capital city, contains the largest and most stable Muslim presence in Bhutan. Because it is the country's administrative and economic hub, many Muslims, particularly long-term residents, work in small shops, vegetable markets, tailoring stalls, or artisanal workshops. A key feature of the Muslim community in Thimphu is the use of informal rented spaces for prayer, including Friday congregations. These makeshift rooms, usually located above shops or in modest apartment buildings, function as temporary gathering points for worship and religious discussions. While the city does not have a mosque, these spaces allow the community to maintain essential practices and preserve social cohesion. Thimphu's Muslim population tends to include a mix of long-settled families, cross-border workers, and temporary laborers employed in retail, handicrafts, and small food businesses. Their presence contributes subtly to the city's multicultural economic fabric. Phuentsholing, located directly on the border with the Indian town of Jigaon, is widely considered the most diverse and economically vibrant city in Bhutan. The constant movement of goods, traders, and workers across the border has made this town a natural entry point for Muslim laborers from India and Bangladesh. The Muslim population here is highly mobile, consisting largely of migrant workers, day laborers, textile traders, and restaurant employees. Because it is Bhutan's busiest trading city, many Muslims find work in wholesale markets, transportation, logistics, and cross-border retail religious practice, typically occurs in small, rented rooms or shared accommodations. While these spaces are not formally recognized, they serve as essential centers for daily and Friday prayers, especially for workers who live far from their home countries. Phuentsholing's multicultural environment makes it the most visibly diverse city in Bhutan, even though the Muslim presence still remains modest relative to the whole population. Samdrup Jongkar, located along the border with the Indian state of Assam, has long served as one of Bhutan's oldest trading corridors. Historically, traders from Assam, Bihar, and Bengal traveled through this region to exchange goods, and some Muslim merchants eventually settled in the area. Today, Samdrup Jongkar hosts a small number of long-established Muslim families who have lived in the city for decades. Their economic roles often include trading household goods, operating small shops, or engaging in transportation and cross-border business. Because of its historical trading character, Samdrup Jongkar maintains steady economic ties with India, which helps sustain a small but stable Muslim presence. As in other regions, religious practice occurs privately or in rented spaces. Galephu, located in southern Bhutan, is a rapidly developing commercial town that has seen increased investment in infrastructure, transportation, and cross-border trade. This growth has attracted migrant workers, including a small number of Muslims, primarily from India. The Muslim community here is mainly composed of temporary laborers, construction workers, retail staff, and small traders. While the population is not as established as in Thimphu or Samdrup Jongkar, Galephu's expanding economy is gradually creating a more recognizable Muslim presence. Religious gatherings are limited and typically held in shared rooms used by groups of workers. There are no permanent facilities, but the community maintains its practices quietly and consistently. Bhutan shares borders only with India and China, and this geography largely explains how Muslims are present in the country. Since Bhutan does not border Bangladesh or Nepal, the Muslim population grows mainly through its close economic ties with India. India is Bhutan's largest economic partner, supplying most labor for construction, retail, and small trade. Many of these workers come from Indian regions with large Muslim populations. For stability, Bhutan restricts political activities and public religious propagation. As long as migrant Muslims remain focused on work and avoid political or missionary activity, their presence is tolerated. Bhutan officially guarantees freedom of religion, but it does so within a controlled framework designed to preserve social harmony and protect the country's Buddhist cultural identity. This means minority religions are allowed to exist, yet they are not actively supported or promoted by the state. For the Muslim community, this creates a unique dynamic. Public construction of mosques is not permitted, largely because Bhutan restricts the establishment of new religious institutions unless they are considered essential to Bhutanese culture or heritage. As a result, Muslims practice their faith in private spaces, rented rooms, community halls, or homes converted into simple prayer areas. Religious propagation or organized missionary activity is also highly restricted. This applies to all minority religions, not just Islam. Bhutan's laws emphasize avoiding any form of proselytization that could disrupt its religious and cultural cohesion. Therefore, Muslim religious life in Bhutan remains quiet, family-centered, and non-public. Despite these limitations, Muslims generally maintain peaceful and positive relations with the Buddhist majority community members, often describe Bhutan as a respectful and safe place, provided religious practices remain private and low profile. Social interactions in markets, workplaces, and neighborhoods tend to be friendly, reflecting Bhutan's broader cultural emphasis on harmony. Looking ahead, the Muslim population in Bhutan is expected to remain small but stable. The lack of major migration channels and Bhutan's strict social policies make rapid demographic shift unlikely. A formal mosque still seems improbable in the near future, but community prayer spaces are likely to become more organized as the population becomes slightly more settled. Urbanization, especially in areas like Thimphu and Galefu, may create more opportunities for Muslim workers and small business owners, strengthening the community's economic presence. Younger Muslims, whether citizens or migrant children, are growing up with greater digital access, allowing them to connect with Islamic education online and maintain ties with communities outside Bhutan. This digital ecosystem may become crucial in sustaining their identity. Islam in Bhutan will likely continue to develop quietly, shaped by economic mobility, cross-border ties, and gradual social adaptation. Bhutan is a small yet strikingly unique nation, defined by its mountains, monarchy, and deeply rooted Buddhist culture. Within this larger identity, the Muslim community exists in silence, small in number, understated in visibility, yet steady in faith. Their story is not one of expansion or conflict, but of persistence. They pray in rented rooms, raise families in a predominantly Buddhist society, and maintain tradition far from their ancestral homelands. In the land of the Thunder Dragon, these Muslims form one of the smallest threads in the spiritual tapestry of the Himalayas. And for them, happiness comes not from numbers or recognition, but from the quiet certainty of holding on to their belief, softly, humbly, and steadfastly, in a place very different from home. Thanks for watching until the end. I hope it was useful. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.